All right, we're going. Hello, everyone. Welcome
All
back
right.
to our 4:30 p.m. presentation, Play by the Rules, an overview of ethics and significance in esports, hosted by yet another Panther. Jean Chance will be talking to us today from the Florida Institute of Technology. Jean, you are up.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Jean Chance, and I will be presenting Play by the Rules, an overview of ethics and significance in esports. This project was created by myself and my colleague Jacob Schoonover, and I will be presenting it today. So, first and foremost, I want to give the disclaimer. I am not HR. I am simply here acknowledging the macro contingencies that are at play for our esports players, coaches, organizational leadership, and the industry as a whole. So, to give a brief introduction on myself, my name is Jean Chance. I come from a traditional sports background. I grew up a competitive figure skater. I competed at the regional, national, and international level, and I have been very fascinated by the use of behavior analysis applications within sports settings. I am currently a second year applied behavior analysis and organizational behavior management student at the Florida Institute of Technology, and I've had the wonderful opportunity to spend the last year and a half applying that lens to esports. If I look familiar, I did previously present Time to Act using behavior analytic exercises based on acceptance and commitment therapy to improve esports player communication with my colleague Savannah Wilson. My colleague Jacob Schoonover also comes from a background in traditional sports. He was a wrestler and snowboarder, and he also comes from an esports background. He played Rainbow Six Siege collegiately, and he strives to apply all behavior analytic applications within all aspects of life, and has spent the last 6 months applying that lens to the frame of esports. So to start, what what are ethics? Ethics are defined as the discipline that's concerned with identifying what's morally good and bad versus what's morally right from wrong. Ethics themselves play a role in daily lives and allow for decisions leading to positive impacts to be made. A lack of understanding of ethics can have unfavorable outcomes for players, coaches, the organization, and teams all alike. So, as we all know, the esports industry has grown significantly over the last 8 years. As we can see on the chart below, we can see the exponential growth compared from 2017 to 2025 and even 2026 predictions. In 2017, the total global video game revenue was $120.4 billion. In 2025, so far, we have amassed $299.9 billion in total global video game revenue. And by the end of 2026, we are projected to have progressed into $321.1 billion in this same total global video game revenue. So, ethics are super important. First and foremost, establish an environment for personal and professional development, meaning that individuals who behave ethically or behave under the adherence to ethical guidelines are able to grow and flourish in their environment, whether it is personal growth and development or professional advancements. The use of ethics increases the inclusion of new and diverse members. So, by creating and fostering a welcoming environment for all, we are able to further expand our ever growing industry. The use of ethics helps to hold people accountable for their actions. So, when there are set guidelines and expectations in place, people understand the expectations in which they are to behave. A lack of ethics can tarnish the industry reputation. It can tarnish the reputation of anyone and everyone who is not behaving with ethical adherence. So, with that being said, ethical behavior should be encouraged across all individuals within an esports organization. This is included but not limited to players, coaches, organizational leadership, and anyone and everyone who is involved with an esports team in whatever capacity that might be. So, in the conduction of a literature review within ethics in sports, I looked at the codes of conduct and codes of ethics that are currently in place across 5 esports titles, 23 traditional sports titles, ranging from your traditional soccer, football, basketball to more niche and less common sports such as figure skating, gymnastics, tennis, cricket, and then 6 governing body organizations. And the findings of this literature review were very telling. To start, 25% of the ethics codes reviewed in traditional sports did not include athlete adherence, meaning that these codes of conducts were created, and when addressing who they were applicable to, it was coaches, it was the team managers, it was anyone and everyone involved with the team besides the athletes. And this is very problematic because it gives the larger scale insinuation that talent triumphs adherence to the rules, meaning that if you're good at what you do, the rules do not inherently apply to you. Integrity and respect were the most frequently cited behaviors that were aligned with ethics. However, integrity and respect are broad terms. So, what does this mean, and how does this behavior vary in different settings? Overall, the literature review findings found inconsistencies with individuals who were held accountable for following the code. So, once again, codes of conduct that were created for specific organizations and specific teams and specific sports, the athletes actively participating in those sports were not always upheld to the requirement of having to adhere to the code of conduct. So, what does this mean on a larger scale? Why should we care about ethics at all? There's a significant need for outlined ethics within esports. So, in ethics codes, at the date of the literature review, at the time the literature review was conducted, there were minimal articles within esports. There overall is plenty of literature that's related to ethics across other industries in traditional sports and other industries and settings, but very little in esports at the time of this literature review. The ethics code should be set in place prior to anything occurring, meaning as a preventative measure and not as a consequence or a responsive measure to something happening. So, since the time of the literature review, there has been new research, new wonderful research that has come out regarding the use of ethics within esports industry. Candio et al. In 2025 wrote the article Governance and Integrity Challenges within Esports in a scoping review. This article found that traditional sports governing concepts are insufficient for addressing esports specific issues. For example, cheating. Cheating on a football field will look very different in a esports setting. A common example of cheating within esports is the use of account sharing or system modifications to further advance gameplay. This can't be done on a football field. This is something that is very esports specific and needs to be addressed in esports specific codes of context. So, with this also being said, the article itself also further emphasized the need for dedicated frameworks. So, once again, rules and codes of conducts that are esports specific, because the rules and codes of conducts addressed in traditional sports are not always sufficient or meet all of the requirements necessary for esports. Additionally, there was an article posted in the International Journal of Esports that discussed an updated classification of cheating in esports. This expansion of cheating further expanded into violations of player trust and morale, collusion, masking, software modifications, servers and timing, exploiting bugs, performance enhancing drugs, the use of steroids, and equipment modifications, as well as purchasing cheat codes. So to summarize everything that we've discussed today, there is a significant need for clear outline expectations for conduct and expectations regarding ethical behavior. Codes of conduct and ethics codes should be created in the anticipation of a need, not as a consequence of something bad happening, meaning that you want to have these rules and guidelines set in place prior to anything happening to decrease the chances of something happening. Whereas if codes around to not allow that bad thing to have ever happened. It is better to have a preventative measure versus creating something in a form of a response. Continued research and ethical considerations as they pertain to esports setting have to always continuously be evaluated in order to keep up with the ever-growing industry. Meaning our industry is growing, technology is advancing. We always need to be diligent in continuing research and always keeping up with considerations as they pertain to this as time goes on and further advancements are made. So as I previously stated, I conducted an extensive literature review. So here are all of my citations and all of my sources that I utilized throughout the conduction of my literature review. So that is everything that I have for everyone today. Thank you so much for tuning into this discussion. And if there are any questions, I am happy to take them now.
Excellent. Thank you, Jean. There are some questions for you.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to expand on this project? And was this research used for further work within the BPC? I feel like that question might have been planted by a colleague.
Oh, I'm not sure. I do plan to continue expansion on this research. I conducted this literature review relatively recently, so to see further recent advancements in um, research relevant to ethics in esports, even so recently as the last couple months, has been so exciting to see. I do plan to continue this work and continue expanding on this literature review. The creation of the literature review actually started in the creation of our own code of conduct and our own code of ethics that we expect our players, coaching staff, and anyone involved with the Florida Tech Esports organization and behavioral performance coaching to adhere to. So great question.
Now, I will actually add a question to this because you just
Mhm,
mentioned both codes of conduct and codes of ethics. So what do you see as
mhm.
the different roles that each of those should play, and do organizations need to have both of them?
That's a really great question. I think codes of ethics typically adhere to I've honestly, throughout my literature review, I did see the terms sometimes used interchangeably. If I had to give my own concrete definition of the difference between a code of ethic versus a code of conduct, I think they both describe the behaviors in which an individual is expected to adhere to. I think codes of conduct themselves um, sometimes go a little bit more into concrete specifics of what the behavior looks like, whereas codes of ethics sometimes give a little bit more arbitrary definitions as to what the overall expectation for the behavior is.
A question that just came in the chat is, what are some common ethical guidelines that should be considered when creating an ethical code?
Really great question. I think some ethical guidelines that should be considered are first and foremost identifying the needs in which you are looking to create a code of conduct or code of ethic for. So I previously gave the example of comparisons between like football and esports, whereas cheating in football is going to look a lot different than cheating in esports. So a set of ethical codes or codes of conducts that are created for rules and regulations regarding football are going to look so much more different than esports. And the main example that I can come up with is like account sharing and system modifications. That's something that can happen in esports, but can't happen in a traditional sports setting. So being mindful of the audience in which you're trying to reach with the creation of the code of conduct.
I guess I'll follow up with that on that with a specific question to esports. How do things, you mentioned cheating, but how do things like toxicity or poor treatment of other players feed into your work on ethics?
That's a really good question. I think in some ways it can one of the big things that we track throughout the BPC is verbal behavior. So we're looking at both in-game and out-of-game spoken behavior amongst the players. We definitely want everyone to have a welcoming and community space because at the end of the day, it is a team sport. So looking at being mindful of who we are talking to, how we're, speaking to them, making sure that even in the heat of the game, we're still being mindful of the words that we're saying and how they can impact others.
All right, we'll give it a second to see if any other questions show up in the chat.
Yeah,
Oh, I guess I actually have another one. I saw that you reviewed multiple
sure.
ethics guidelines from the same company. For instance, you had both the League of Legends ones and the Valorant ones. Were there differences between
Mhm.
those, even though they're produced by the same overall body?
There were slight minimal differences, and I think part of that being due to the nature of the games, but overall they were very similar.
So it looked like people were following overall ethical guidelines and then
Mhm.
customizing them a little bit to the needs of the
Mhm.
game.
Exactly.
Hmm,
Yes.
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Everything else I'm seeing in the chat says, woo, incredible job, very valuable research. I don't see any
Thank
other
you.
questions, but we do still have a few minutes left. Is there anything else you want to share about this project or where it's going next?
Um, just once again, I'm really excited to see the continuation of other people, other organizations doing research in ethical considerations as they pertain to esports. As I said previously, it's an ever-growing industry. Technology advances, everything's growing, and so our knowledge in all aspects of the industry need to continue to progress and grow with that. So it's really exciting for me to see that there is so much growth and research being done in this specific aspect of the industry as a whole. I actually, as I mentioned previously, I did complete this literature review relatively recently. So this was a literature review that was conducted over the course of the past summer. So between May, June, and then I actually completed the last day of my literature review was July 1st, and on July 2nd was when one of the articles that I discussed actually was published. So very relatively recently published in comparison to when I did the literature review. So I look forward to seeing future research that's published and future takeaways being implemented from the discussion of ethics within our industry.
Excellent. Well, I'm seeing no other questions come in, so we will probably wrap up here. We will be going on a brief break while we wait for our next presenter, and then we'll be coming back at 5 p.m. Eastern with a discussion on women of color experiences in esports. So first, thank you to the audience for all of your great questions. Thank you to Jean for presenting this very interesting work, and we'll see you all back here at 5.
Awesome.